Welcome to our deep dive on how varying immigration policies shape the challenges of illegal immigration worldwide. To start, can you explain what we mean by lax and strict immigration policies and why these distinctions matter?
Absolutely. Lax policies typically offer easier entry, lenient enforcement, or broad humanitarian exceptions. Strict policies, in contrast, emphasize rigorous screening, tough border controls, and harsh penalties. The consequences often manifest in very different societal issues, which we'll explore by continent.
That framework really sets the stage. Let's now examine how these policy choices play out in specific, highly visited countries, starting with those known for more lenient approaches.
Right, and as we move through each region, we'll see how a nation's openness can bring both benefits and significant unintended drawbacks, often affecting not just migrants, but also local communities and regional geopolitics.
Let's begin with North America. Mexico is often considered a transit country, with historically lax enforcement along its southern border. What challenges does this create domestically and internationally?
Mexico's flexible approach has made its southern border a hotspot for migrant flows from Central America. This overwhelms local services, especially in border towns like Tapachula, and facilitates exploitation by human trafficking networks. The U.S. has pressured Mexico to tighten controls, creating diplomatic friction.
How does this tension impact the people on the ground, both migrants and Mexican citizens?
Local communities often struggle with overcrowded shelters and strained healthcare. Migrants face danger from cartels, while citizens sometimes perceive increased crime or job competition. Studies show emergency response spending in border towns has doubled in the last decade, highlighting real fiscal pressures.
Turning to Europe, France is known for its humanitarian tradition, but its asylum system has become overwhelmed. What specific issues arise from this situation?
France faces a backlog in processing asylum claims and inconsistent deportation enforcement. This has led to informal migrant camps, such as those in Calais, where thousands live in precarious conditions. Public frustration has grown, fueling political polarization and strengthening far-right parties.
Are there any parallels with other European countries, or is France's situation unique?
While similar camps exist in Italy or Greece, France's central geographic role in Europe and its colonial history make its asylum pressures distinct. A 2022 government report noted that over 60% of rejected asylum seekers remain in-country, making enforcement a persistent challenge.
Let's shift to Asia, specifically Thailand. Its tourism-driven economy has led to relaxed visa enforcement. What are the consequences of this approach?
Thailand's lax visa policies invite millions of visitors annually, but many overstay or work illegally. This swells the ranks of undocumented laborers in sectors like hospitality and construction. These workers often face exploitative conditions, lacking legal protections or access to healthcare.
What's the broader social impact on Thai society?
Informal labor markets can depress wages and fuel resentment among locals. At the same time, businesses benefit from cheap labor, creating a paradox where enforcement is selectively ignored. The UN estimates that up to 10% of Thailand's workforce may be undocumented, illustrating the scale of the issue.
Now, let's consider South Africa, often cited for its porous borders and inconsistent enforcement. How does this shape internal dynamics?
South Africa's relative economic prosperity attracts migrants from across the continent. Weak border controls and inconsistent policy enforcement result in high numbers of undocumented arrivals, particularly from Zimbabwe and Mozambique. This has fueled xenophobic violence and fierce competition for jobs and housing.
Social unrest sounds like a serious consequence. Are local services able to cope with these influxes?
Urban centers, especially Johannesburg, face overcrowded hospitals and schools. In 2019, a government report showed that 15% of public clinic visits involved foreign nationals, stoking public resentment and complicating integration efforts.
Turning to South America, Brazil has offered amnesty and services for undocumented migrants, particularly Venezuelans. What are the practical effects of this humanitarian stance?
Brazil's openness has saved lives, with over 300 Venezuelans receiving temporary legal status since 2017. However, border states like Roraima report overcrowded shelters, increased competition for low-skilled jobs, and strained healthcare capacity. Local backlash is growing as resources are stretched thin.
How do authorities try to balance compassion with local needs?
Federal programs have relocated migrants to less impacted cities, but logistical hurdles and inconsistent funding limit success. A 2021 survey found that 48% of locals in border regions felt services had worsened due to migration, revealing deep-seated tensions.
Let's discuss Oceania, specifically Fiji, a regional hub with limited capacity to monitor overstays. What challenges does this create for the country?
Fiji's relaxed enforcement makes it attractive for workers from neighboring Pacific islands. Many overstay their visas, contributing to informal labor markets, especially in agriculture and domestic work. The government struggles to track overstayers due to limited border resources.
What are the broader implications for Fiji's economy and society?
While the influx supports key industries, it also complicates wage regulation and social services. Hypothetically, if enforcement tightened, labor shortages could emerge, but as it stands, undocumented workers remain largely invisible, with few legal protections.
Let's pivot to countries with strict immigration policies, starting with the U.S. How do high enforcement and detention rates shape the landscape of illegal immigration?
The U.S. enforces one of the world's strictest border regimes, with over 1.7 million detentions in 2021 alone. This has led to humanitarian controversies, family separations, overcrowded detention centers, and a shadow economy where undocumented workers fear reporting abuse, making them vulnerable to exploitation.
Do these policies effectively deter illegal immigration, or do they create new problems?
While border apprehensions have fluctuated, strict enforcement hasn't eliminated illegal entry. Instead, it's pushed migrants into more dangerous crossing routes and fostered a persistent underground labor market, estimated at over 7 million workers according to Pew Research.
Next, let's examine Germany, known for tight asylum vetting and integration requirements. What are the primary challenges here?
Germany's comprehensive screening process has led to significant backlogs. Some applicants wait years for a decision. Rejected asylum seekers often form underground communities to avoid deportation, straining law enforcement and social cohesion. Deportation costs have risen sharply, topping $350 million in 2022.
Are there unintended labor market consequences from these strict policies?
Indeed, labor shortages in sectors like elder care and logistics have sparked debate. Some economists argue for more flexible pathways, noting that rigid exclusion can drive migrants into informal work, undermining integration and tax collection.
Now, let's discuss Japan, which has some of the world's strictest visa and asylum rules. How does this affect both migrants and the Japanese economy?
Japan's asylum acceptance rate is under 1%. Despite an aging population, the country relies on undocumented workers for sectors like agriculture and elder care. Migrants often face social isolation, with limited community support and little chance of legal status, perpetuating vulnerability.
If Japan were to relax its policies, what might change?
Loosening restrictions could address labor shortages and improve integration, but public opinion remains wary. A hypothetical pilot program in 2019 saw positive results in rural areas, suggesting that carefully managed openness might benefit both migrants and the economy.
Moving to Africa, Morocco has implemented strong border controls, especially with Spain. What impact does this have on migrants trying to reach Europe?
Morocco's tight controls often leave migrants stranded in makeshift camps near Ceuta and Melilla. Unable to progress or return home, they face poor living conditions and frequent human rights abuses. Amnesty International has documented hundreds of forced evictions in recent years.
How do these conditions affect local Moroccan communities?
Tensions can rise as camps grow, leading to clashes with police and local residents. Humanitarian organizations attempt to fill gaps, but resources are limited. The situation illustrates how strict policies can create humanitarian dilemmas, even outside the target destination.
South America's Chile has recently tightened its immigration laws. What ripple effects have emerged since these changes?
Stricter entry requirements have forced migrants to use perilous routes through deserts and mountains. This shift has fueled a rise in smuggling networks and increased migrant deaths. For example, Border authorities recorded a 40% jump in rescues from hazardous crossings in 2023 alone.
Does this stricter stance lead to reduced overall migration or just more dangerous journeys?
Research suggests total migration hasn't dropped significantly. Instead, risks have risen. Humanitarian groups warn that desperation leads to greater reliance on traffickers, shifting the problem rather than solving it.
Finally, let's talk about Australia's zero-tolerance policy, which includes offshore detention for boat arrivals. What are the key consequences of this approach?
Australia detains asylum seekers in remote Pacific centers, drawing criticism for human rights abuses and mental health crises. The system is costly, over $1 billion annually, and has been condemned by the UN for indefinite detention without trial.
Does this policy deter irregular migration, or are there unforeseen side effects?
Arrivals by boat have dropped, but experts argue the human cost is unsustainable. Former detainees report lasting trauma, and Australia's international reputation has suffered. Some policymakers advocate alternatives, such as community-based processing, to balance security and dignity.
To wrap up, it's clear that both lax and strict immigration policies come with trade-offs. From your perspective, what's the key to finding a sustainable path forward?
The most effective systems balance border security with humanitarian values and practical needs. This means investing in fair asylum processing, supporting local services, and creating regulated pathways for workers. No system is perfect, but ongoing adaptation and international cooperation are vital.
It sounds like nuanced, evidence-based approaches are essential to minimize harm and maximize benefits. Thank you for guiding us through these complex global dynamics.
Thank you for having me. Immigration will remain a defining issue, and understanding its multifaceted impacts is the first step toward better policy.